Hey everybody, Jason here with Big Muskie Blade Works. Today I'm going to do a tutorial on how to install mosaic pins in your knife handle. You may have seen an earlier video I did how to make mosaic pins. Looked all over YouTube, couldn't find a good video on how to install them, so I figured since it took me a while the first time I would make a tutorial, show everybody how to do it, maybe save you some headaches. Today I'm going to be putting the handles on this test piece here. Made out of 1084 from Aldo Bruno, New Jersey Steel Baron. This was just going to be a little test knife I was going to make and destroy, but since it passed on my non-destructive testing, I figured I would put some handles on it and wear it around as an EDC and give it a little bit of real-world testing. Okay, materials you're going to need to attach your handles. You need your knife, obviously. These are 1/4-inch holes in mine. You're going to need your epoxy. This is Brownell's Acre glass, the liquid formulation. I've used the gel before. They both work, but everyone seems to prefer the liquid. It is a little easier to use and to clean up. This is black pigment from USA Knife Maker. If you don't dye your Acre glass, it turns to be like a yellowish color, so I like the black pigment in mine. To mix it, it's by volume, not by weight, so I use syringes. These are from like Walgreens, just for giving children medication. Craft sticks to spread it over the knife. You need obviously your handle material. This is a black wood, African black wood. I like to mix the Acre glass in Ziploc bags. It's a lot easier to apply. It doesn't get everywhere. You need your pin material. You can check out my earlier video on making these. It's also on my channel on YouTube. And then I usually use like a fine tip marker to mark out on here where my scale is going to sit on the blade and then where to put the pins. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and cut out my scales. I usually cut them before I drill the holes. That way I can be sure that I can get a book match set and there's nothing inside the wood. I use a lot of burl, so that's an issue sometimes. But this is a pretty solid block. I'm just going to go ahead and cut them before like I normally do, and I'll show you how I do it. I'll arrange the faces inside the knife so I don't have any unraveling of the edge that's going to show once the pins are installed. Alright, let's go ahead and put the holes in it. Alright, once you cut your handle slabs out, find which ends are bookmarked that you want out, and then mark on the sides that you want to stay in. I just put it in on there so I don't flip them and then end up with mismatched sides. Check your fit so there's no gap in between here. If there's a slight gap, it can be bent in when you clamp them together with your epoxy. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sides that are in, and I'm going to have those sides out when I drill. Then just take some painter's tape, make sure they're nice and square together, and tape them up. And then just put your knife on where you want the holes to sit, and I cut a little extra just so that it'll fit on the front and the back, so I can, if I make a wrong cut later or I grind a little too much, I still got a little extra room. Okay, once they're taped together, you're going to go ahead and tape your knife onto it. The only reason I do this is so I have a good guide from where my holes are going to go. Nothing fancy, just make sure it sticks to the block for that first hole. Then once you drill your first hole in, you're going to put a pin in that hole so your second hole will align when you go to assemble your knife. Okay, I'm going to drill the holes now, 1/4-inch bit, and I'm just going to use this as a guide to get nice straight pin holes. Once I get my holes through, I have these just a brass pin and one of my other pins that are snug enough that it'll fit right through this 1/4-inch bit. Hold it in place so that when I drill my second hole, I'm guaranteed a good alignment. you got your hole cut, then you should be able to slide your pin through there. Proper alignment. And there we go. It's coming off the back side here, so that this is definitely going to line up. I'll go ahead and drill my second hole now. Alright, that one should go right through smoothly too. So now that you know when you assemble your knife, you're going to have a good tight fit, and the middle is your outside. There won't be any unraveling of the wood, any spalling out of the wood. Okay, when you take your scales apart, you're going to notice that there isn't any spalling right in here, which is good because that's the side that's going to be showing. If there is any, then there's going to be a nasty little gap between your pin and your handle, and it just isn't going to look very well. So go ahead and test fit to make sure your insides are in. And not. So it'll fit up nicely, no gapping in between, so that's good. And they're going to be snug because every wood will open up just a little bit differently than different species. So this did not open up very much. This is some good hard wood. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the pin material that I want to use, a 1/4 inch. And what I do differently than a lot of people, rather than cut the hole to my pin, I'll cut my 1/4 inch hole there, and then I will sand this down with a 110 grit so it perfectly matches each of my holes, so I don't have any gaps. And then I just have to make sure that I remember which pin goes in the front, which pin goes in the back. Alright. Okay, once you've checked your scales, go ahead and put your knife oriented out the way that you want. You're going to insert your pins through it just to hold it in place. You just take a pencil and trace around. I'm going to draw a line across here where I want my front to be. I'll just mark it with lines. So when I take it off, I can draw what it's going to look like. Once that's done, you put your pins back in it, and you can take it over to your bandsaw and cut it out pretty close to the final shape. Alright, once it's cut out basically to its close to final shape, I'll take it over to the belt sander and I will grind the front to exactly how it's going to sit on the knife, and then I'll sand it up all the way to probably a 600 grit, and then I'll round the corners just on the front so that once it's on the knife I don't have to do any shaping on that. Okay, once you've got your blade polished up to where you want it, I used a Scotch-Brite belt on the whole thing. I used a coarser one in the back and the handle area just so I can get some rough grooves in here. Give the epoxy a little something to hold on to. Once that's done, I take a carbide scribe and scrape up the inside of the scale, just a little bit more roughness. And these are pretty good because we've already hit these with 120 grit to sand them down to fit in here. Then you're going to wipe everything down with acetone just to make sure there's nothing on the blade or the handle that will stop the epoxy from setting in there. already wiped these down pretty good, I think. Yep, that's pretty good. Alright, so the next thing you're going to do is you're going to mix up your epoxy, the Acroglass. It is a 4-to-1 ratio, 4 parts resin to 1 part hardener. Since these aren't the greatest with the measurements, what I do is I preload the tips of them so I don't have to account for any loss up in that area. So I'm going to get a sandwich bag out. This is the way I like to do it. Open this thing up and I just put a little PVC cap. And you're definitely going to want to use gloves for this because this stuff works really, really well and you don't want to get it on your hands. Once I mix this up, I'll put a little bit of my black in there, my pigment, and then I'll go ahead and put on the blade. I'm going to leave a little bit on the back side so it'll fill up these ridges in here, and we should be good to go. I'll get a couple clamps nearby. I like these. These work pretty well. Clamp it down, leave it overnight. I don't think I left it out of the video, but I went ahead and put these scales together and sanded down a little closer to what the final product is going to be, so I don't have to do so much grinding on these handles because this black wood is really, really tough to grind. Alright, so I'm going to get my resin, my hardener. I'm going to go ahead and use 2 milliliters of the resin to a half milliliter of the hardener, so I don't waste any. And if I leave the tips like this, I can just put them in a bag and it doesn't get hard on me or anything, so it's nice for later because I don't have to try to guess how much I left in the tip of the syringe. Set those aside. Now I'm going to take a little bit of pigment. For just making up enough for one knife, I'll probably just do 2 drops of pigment in here.
You've got mail.
Make sure to shake it up because it will settle out a little bit. Cap these back up to get them out of the way. Alright, now mix this up. I put it in the very corner of the bag so that I can twist this off. Mix it up, nice black color. Go ahead and I usually mix it for around a minute just to make sure that everything is all mixed up pretty good there. Alright. Get my craft stick out before I cut open the bag. Alright, it's all mixed up. All I need to do, pinch the corner down, get all the epoxy out of the way, and snip off just a tiny piece of the corner. This stuff is very liquidy and it'll come out pretty easy on you. orient them how I want them. Go ahead and put some on the first scale. The most important part is just to make sure you get enough around the edges. You don't want to leave any gaps in there. And then once I get this scale on, I'll squirt a little bit more along the spine area to fill up the area that I filed. You don't need to worry about getting it over the handle because you're just going to sand that off. Wrong side on there. Try it again. Paying too much attention to the video and not watching where I put the side. And make sure I get some on the sides of my pin. Make sure you get the insides coated of the hole that you're going to put the pin through and the actual knife itself. And when it is warm out like it is today, this stuff is going to be very, very runny. Now I know I don't have to push these through too hard. I sanded them probably a little too much, but I've never had an issue with these things coming apart. But with the epoxy and the grooves that got scarred into the tube from the 110 belt, it does a pretty good job holding it down. Lots of tight fit there. You probably notice some squirt out the front side. If not, you don't have to put a little bit more in there. I think I might put a little bit more. Alright, get some on the other side now. Make sure I leave enough in here so I can fill the back in. Alright, make sure you see it coming out of all the sides. Yep. Front. Yep. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and squeeze some, fill up the gaps in the back. And once I get this set to where I want it, I will put a little bit more in the back area. I just want to get some in there right now. And with the heat out, this stuff is really runny today. So what you're going to do is then, once your pins are in, pretty tight, I'm going to go ahead and use a pair of pliers and make sure that my pins are oriented the right way. With these, it's not too big of a deal because it's a repeating pattern. Okay, through a pretty good amount on each side. Go ahead and clamp them up. Okay, after this is sat for at least 24 hours, you can go ahead and take your clamps off. And we're going to go ahead and sand the pins now. I did cheat, took this out yesterday. I just wanted to see what the spine work was going to look like. It looks pretty good. A couple small spots, like right in here. I get these highlighted. That there's a couple small holes. Those are just air bubbles that were in the mix when I put it on the knife. So what I'm going to do is just clean out the holes with acetone, with maybe take some acrylonitrile, then mix it back up, maybe with a toothpick, dab it back in the holes, let it sit, and then smooth it flat just so there's no little bubbles in there. Go ahead now, I'm going to put a 120 grit on the belt and start filing or sanding on the pins to get them flush with the handle. You want to make sure you keep the pins cool. I grind a little bit and I'll dunk it in water. You just don't want these to get hot. Take a chance at melting the epoxy in it. I didn't use acrylonitrile in the pins. It's just a 2-ton, but I've never had any issues with the pins using 2-tons. So until I do, I'll just keep going this way. I'll go ahead and sand these flush, dunk it in water, and keep it nice and cool, and then we'll see what it looks like. Okay, well I just took it off the 100 grit, and that's what we got. I washed it with some acetone real quick just to get any of the dust out of it. So we have to zoom in. Front pin's a little too far forward, but being this is just for me, and I never actually intend on putting a handle on it, I'm not too upset with that. So I'll try to get some pictures up once I round it off and make it ready to carry. But there you go. Here's your tutorial on how to put in mosaic pins. Thanks for watching.